And I'm not selling a fridge. I'm not selling a car or a house. I'm actually dealing with the most important thing out there, which is the human being. And human beings are really unpredictable. They're fascinating. They're interesting. They're complex. At the end of the day, they're the ones that make the world go round. I've always said that, I'm not going to put in the system. I'm going to put in the human being who's going to change that company. And that's the beauty of this job.
Welcome to Ultrahabits. Here, we go under the hood with our guests to unpack the minutiae and to understand what processes and systems they engage or research that result in ultra-enhanced living.
Hey guys, it is RJ Singh here, joining you bright and early. It is about 6 a.m. and we are bringing to you another guest on the Ultrahabits Podcast. And we are joined by Gregory Robinson, who is the founder of Blenheim Partners and also the creator of the No Limitations podcast. And that's where I came across his work a few years ago. Now, Gregory and his team at Blenheim Partners source talent, right? They're not your everyday recruitment firm, though. They are what is referred to as executive search and advisory. Effectively, they are engaged by ASX listed firms, global firms at a board level to source talent for a particular remit. Now, I've been trying to get Greg on this show for a long time. They are extremely discreet given the nature of how they operate. They're effectively like ninjas, and it has taken a bit of time to line this conversation. Thank you, Ian Pollard, for doing the introductions. Without you, I would not have been able to get Greg on the show. Now, I wanted to talk to Greg about talent, his experience with it, being a curator of it, any commonalities. What has he seen over the years running an organization like this that has helped him identify the markers of talent? And then how can we, as executives climbing the ranks, learn from what Greg's learned? That was the conversation that I wanted to have, and we indeed had that conversation. Now, Greg is a really, really dynamic, hard-hitting, humble man himself. Look, when I initially lined this conversation up with Greg, I expected this kind of really polished, highfalutin dude, and he is polished, but he is also really salt of the earth. You know, he cut his teeth recruiting in London, built his firm brick by brick, and he keeps it real. He's also, for those of us within the Ultrahabits community that love endurance sport, he's run the Marathon des Sables, he's done marathons, he's swam across the English Channel. The guy is gritty, and he's, he brings a dynamic force to the show, and we are here really to learn today about what does it take to get to the top, what are the markers of talent, and what can we do to start to really hone in on the development of that within our own careers. So I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Greg. I really do hope you enjoy this show. I really enjoyed talking to Greg, and I actually learned quite a lot myself. So I'm going to leave you to it. Peace out, guys. If you haven't already, please rate this podcast. The link is in the show notes. Again, it's through your continual engagement, your support, that we are able to scale this thing. Peace out. Enjoy. Greg, welcome to the Ultrahabits show. You are a very, very busy man, and I finally have pinned you down after all these months. So I'm really, really happy to have you on the show. Welcome.
Ranjit, absolute pleasure. Thanks for tracking me down. You've done a great job.
I came across you initially when I started listening to your No Limitations podcast. It had unbelievable guests and really great conversations on there. And I really wanted the opportunity to reach out to you and talk to you about your experience with talent. Now, before we do that, maybe I'll give you some time to just introduce yourself and tell our audience what you do.
Yeah, sure, Ranjit. So my name's Greg Robinson, as you said. I'm an Australian. I'm a very fortunate person. I grew up in Australia and for a good family. Mum and Dad looked after me. Dad was a civil engineer who was, in that regard, much of a risk taker, but also a perfectionist. Mum held the household together. Dad was away 6 days a week. building dams, bridges, and everything else, roads for this country. And then I got to a point in life when I grew up, after I educated myself, went to university. My life changed later on when I was fortunate enough to go to the UK. And in the UK, I fell into this by accident, like we all do, into this interesting industry called executive search. And what is the executive search? It's a privileged industry to be a part of. What it actually is you're engaged to work with normally the most senior leaders in corporate, could be not-for-profits, could be sporting organizations, exposed to them to help them identify and attract the very best individuals to grow their particular business, their organization. And when you pack your bags with no plan in mind, just to go and see the world and get sponsored a couple of times and do the right thing by those in the UK, it's amazing how doors open up. I always had the view that if you go into someone else's country, you're a guest. And if you respect people for that, don't whinge about the weather as we always do. That's half the reason you're going there, because you want something different. You want to experience something different. Go into that pub, have that warm beer, meet those individuals, quirky as they are, with a history that we've never had, with an attitude we don't see. When you walk into a church full of history of armies, wars, and battles, you sit back and say, my God, this is fascinating. And when you actually say and say, I'm going to give it my best shot here, I've got nothing to lose. One day I'll go back home to sunny Australia. And things started happening for me. And I was very, very fortunate. I fell into this world of search and I got asked to do some of the biggest assignments in what is at that time, the FTSE 100, FTSE 250, and some enormous sporting events as well. So what is executive search? Search is being brought into the shadows, as you say a bit earlier, Engine. You're not out there a lot. A company or an organization is taking you and your team in absolute confidence to go to people who are normally exceptionally happy, for great reputation, doing tremendous work, and you've got to tap them on the shoulder when they're driving their car home on a Thursday night, not expecting a call, engage them, and put forward a proposition that could change their life, their career. And forget about placing just people in roles. What you do every day, in my view, is you change people's lives. That's what I love about my job. I'm changing that client of mine's life. If this person is lucky to seize and capture this individual, that would change that organization. And if you put a new chief exec into an organization, or a CFO, a COO, a chairman, a board member, that's going to have a rippling effect, and it's going to have ramifications for everyone in that company. So you better get it right. If you appoint that person's going home to see their wife, the husband, and they're going to talk about, my God, I didn't expect this call. It's upheaval. We may be relocating in different parts of the world, but this is going to be something which could be a game changer for us. Now, there's two parts to that. There's the interest and the engagement, the fact you're meeting some of the sharpest people in the world, how they operate, how they think, what they're like under pressure, what drives them, what motivates them. That's your job to find that out and distill that. At this level, they're all exceptionally good in presenting what they want you to believe. Your job is to open them up and get behind. And you do that not necessarily straight away, just through the initial conversation or that face-to-face interview. Where search plays its role, it's the backgrounding. It's the off-the-record discussions that people don't know that we have on everyone. When someone walks into our room or into our office or into our boardroom to have a conversation with us, we already know a lot about them. We already know their history. We know who rates them. We know some of the weaknesses. That's our job. So in some regards, similar to a bit of a spy. You got your sources. You're tapping people in the quiet. You're getting views. You're not necessarily sharing a lot either, and that's your job. And in doing that, what you're doing is you're triangulating information on someone in regards to a particular assignment, particular brief, and are they going to be suitable? And have they got the ambition, the skill, the motivation, and the cultural fit? It comes down to, are they going to fit into this company? Or sometimes that's overused. Are they going to take this company to a different level? They may break a few plates of china. They may upset the norm. Maybe that chief exec wants that. Maybe that chairman wants that. And that's what we're there to ascertain. And that's the beauty of this game. And I fell into this about 22 years ago, arranged it. I didn't have a clue what it was about. The person who taught me how to do it, I got thrown in the deep end. I got told that I could do it. I got tapped by a few people. And it was my secretary, who was from the East End of London. He knew every step of the way. He taught me how to become a search consultant. I owe her everything. She sorted me out, and yet there were these gentlemen and ladies who were so busy, didn't give me the time of day, but the secretary was the one who put me on the spot and said, you can make it, but you're going to have to sort it this way. And she gave me the discipline that I required. So in doing that, I did pretty well in the UK. I came back to Australia, did pretty well, lived up in Asia. So I got the opportunity to live in different parts of the world. And then 12 years ago, 10 years ago, we established Blenheim Partners, which is a boutique premier search firm. In my view, it's top level. That's what we do, and engage with the very best people in the country. And again, as I said, it's a very privileged industry to be part of.
So, Greg, when you were in the UK, we had a offline conversation, and you told me that you weren't necessarily the smartest, but you had the biggest engine, and you were willing to do the work. So when you got to the UK and you got involved in, I would suppose it wasn't at the level that you're doing now.
Yep.
What did it take for you to evolve from that recruiter to where you're at now? And what were some of the skills that you had to engage to move along that trajectory? Like, how did you have to evolve?
Self-awareness. Just be realistic to yourself and start with. And I think you're a pretty good runner from what I understand. If you want to give a good time to get that marathon complete, you got to start and work out what the aim is and work back from that. What's the difference in your professional life or your personal life? So I was, I looked at some of these people and the meetings they had, the work they did, the influence that they had as well, and the results that they achieved. And with that, I decided, well, okay, I got to look at myself. No, I don't have those skills. I had a bad situation. I talk very fast, always have. Okay, well, that's interesting. There's that smart or fast talking Australian on the phone. So maybe I stood out because of that. I didn't have the relationship. I didn't go to Eton, Harrow, or the right school. I'd come from the Shire and down in Cronulla, and had packed my bags. But I just had an attitude which was, well, let's listen, let's learn. And if you do that and you approach people in the right manner, it's amazing how much people are willing to help and engage. That's the big thing. Put yourself in a position. And with that, I decided, well, I don't have all that, but what I do have, as you say earlier, a bit of a motor. I'm going to work my backside off. When everybody goes out the front door and going home at night, that's when I get on the phone and make those extra calls. That's when I get those extra meetings. That's when I get to meet other people because of their hard yards at 9 o'clock at night and I'm still sitting in the office. I was playing catch up, and it didn't worry me, but it just gave me, when everybody else walked out, that's when I thought, you're a ripper. Now let's bring it on. You've got to have a bit of that in you if you want to get ahead, and you've got to be prepared to mess up, make mistakes, which I did plenty of times, and then say, okay, well, it's not the end of the world. I'm not getting, I'm not up against the wall going to be shot. I'm simply just going to have to think about it differently, go and seek some counsel. And again, like everything, if you approach most people, I don't know, what's your experience, Reg? Most people are willing to help out. You didn't become a superstar runner overnight. Someone would have sat down and talked you through your cadence, your stride, how you land, your feet, et cetera, et cetera. Ask the questions. Isn't it amazing what happens?
This colleague in England that helped you out, how did she help you? Like, what was the context of that relationship?
Running a search is it's a pretty complex process, but it is a process like a lot of things in life. It's a discipline, and everything from how you address people, how you engage them on the first call, how you summarize the key themes of what you want to cover. When do you make your play? Every step of the way. There's something like 55, 60 steps in undertaking a proper search. And a search normally gets, for everybody out there, a search, when you engage from a client to maybe the chairman or the chief exec to replace, 9 times out of 10, these searches are done in absolute confidence. So it's a company listed in Australia on the Australian Stock Exchange. It's a company listed in the UK in the FTSE 100. Could be the US as well. You can't go public. Because if this leaks, share price is going to fall. There's going to be embarrassment. Your reputation is over, and that company's reputation is in trouble that they've actually gone to replace someone and it's been leaked publicly. So it's a pretty damning effect. So with that, you've got to be incredibly tight and focused on what you do. You've got to make sure your team is doing exactly the same. You give a certain amount of information without too much. And if you're going to do that, you don't get many chances around it and making that call to that senior executive who everyone's referred to you as this is the person who's going to be the game changer. You got one shot at the title here, and you've told the client, based on your research, based on the recommendations, based on the off-the-record conversations, based on their career history, that this person makes absolute sense. And what's it going to take to get them across the line? Remember, they're comfortable in their role. That's why they're so good. Right? I'm not going to the person 9 times out of 10 who's sitting on the sideline. It's not recruitment. It's very, very different. You're out there to get the person to bring across to a company. That company is after to change their trajectory. And that's what you're trying to do. So she sat me down and worked through the whole process to build up to that point, to make sure I'd covered every part of the market. There was no stone left unturned. These were definitely the very best of the candidates. And she rammed it down me and rammed it down me and rammed it down me. And I'll give her credit. So therefore, I just got in my blood. You just don't, when you take on a client search, you're taking on their money, you're taking on their reputation, you're representing them in the market, you're their ambassador in the market. You can't do it half-hearted, and you can't do it not fully prepared. And when you get to that point, as you say, when you do your running event, you got to put it all together on the day. Some days, there's always something always goes wrong. You just somehow got to manage that. And when you get this guy, this lady, and you make that call, you've got to think, my God, how am I going to get them over the line? And then it's a process. Then the journey begins. Then the wooing begins. Then the discussion begins. And then you've got to understand them. And you've got to get to their level. This is about beauty. We're not dealing with, and I'm not selling a fridge. I'm not selling a car or a house. I'm actually dealing with the most important thing out there, which is the human being. And human beings are really unpredictable. They're fascinating. They're interesting. They're complex. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that make the world go round. I've always said that, I'm not going to put in the system. I'm going to put in the human being who's going to change that company. And that's the beauty of this job.
How did you manage your imposter syndrome, Greg? Because I'm sure you would have had it initially, at least.
Imposter syndrome? What do you mean by that in this regard?
Well, I would imagine as a young dude talking to some key executives, you would have maybe felt like you don't deserve a seat at the table, or you might have had some fear. How would you have managed that if you had it at all?
Oh, of course you do. Everyone has fear. Right? That's part of nature, right? You're going to put yourself in a spot where you want to change. That's not natural necessarily. You're going to think about it, and you're going to have to go through all those sort of preconceived ideas or what people have thought about you in the past. What are you doing calling some of the most senior people in the country? And you haven't got a background to do that. How did you earn the right to do that, right? So you got all that in your back of your mind, 100%. I was really lucky in one regard. I had a couple of old-timers, one in particular who was the bluest of the blue in terms of the UK. He was a member of some of the most well-known clubs, come from that sort of pedigree. I'm not surprised if he knocked around at one stage as a young man of Winston Churchill. He was one of those sort of people. He was 72 years old when I walked into the office. No one gave me the time of day. This gentleman walked up and said, "Hey, young man, how you going?" And at 7:30 in the morning the next day was the Financial Times was on my desk, and he had circled it and marked it. He'd already been in there by 7:30 and said, why are you running late? Why aren't you across this? And these are the people you've got to learn and you've got to know. And he said, come on, we'll go out to lunch. You better there's a process in that. Make sure that you're there first. That never make the guest wait. This is your approach. And he was just one of those raconteurs, very, very well connected. I don't know why. He was classic British from the country, old school, old wealth. So in that regard, from Eton, funny enough, he actually came from, he had studied at Eton. And yet he was the gentleman who, with the hell of it for everybody else who had maybe had their own little bit of snobbery. He wasn't. He was going to say, mate, come on, let's give it a crack. So at 5:30, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, for a 72-year-old, I could be standing at a bar, at a nice little cocktail bar somewhere in Mayfair, and he's leaving me for dead. So it was a mind blower. This person knew how to live, and that's what I got out of this guy. What do you got to lose? Not a lot. Just back yourself up. Do your homework. Do your homework. Do your homework. Do your prep. Same as you as an athlete. Do your prep. Don't leave anything on the sideline. And if you can do it, and this is what search is about. Ultimately, it's like a sport. It's competitive. You're up against other organizations. You've got to build your reputation in your market. You've got to get the clients out there or potential clients out there to engage with you. All right. And that's part of it. And that's the thrill of it as well. Winning clients and working with clients and solving problems. And so you've got to have that, I guess, that hunger in you. But you've got to have the polish.
That's interesting because my perception of you is that you're intense and you know how to turn that engine on and work hard, but you also have this kind of velvet glove, and I'm sure you evolved that because of your craft. You had to, right? Like, you can't just come across as a mongrel. I suppose you have to have that polish and that ability to have the right conversations with the right people, yet have that drive and that tenacity. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I don't think say mongrel is the right word, but you got to have focus, right? And yeah, but look, it's no different to any top person. That's wrong. It's not different to anybody wanting to give it the best shot. Okay, you're going to have to leave some stuff behind. You're going to have to make some sacrifice. You've made the call. You want to improve yourself. You've made the call. If you're in this game, you're going to give it your best shot. You don't want to be number 2, number 3, number 4, or number 5. All right. If you're going to do that, you got to get out there and do something different, right? Which means you've got to push yourself somewhat harder. That means you've got to walk away from certain stuff. But with that, you've made the call that the upside is far better than the downside. So the sacrifice isn't, not worried. You don't worry about that after a while. Look, in my role, and in establishing this company, so that's a different part, Ranjit. So it's one being okay, being in the confines of a good search firm, and then working with really good people. Very different than when you decide one morning, I'm going to establish a firm. We're going to be a little bit different. Our process will be different. The way that we think will be different. And hopefully you can attract sort of like-minded people. That's hard yards. Particularly, again, I've never done that, never run a business before. Made plenty of mistakes along the way. But hey, you're living, and that's what I want to do. I want to live. And when you're living and you're pushing yourself, guess what? You're taking on every day new things. You're just learning so much more about everything every day. And look, for me, if I'm sitting in front of this afternoon, I might have to go and see a chairman or a chief exec, Ranjit. Now, I could be really, one-dimensional and take that brief, listen to that person's concerns, what they're trying to do, that organization. As we come out of COVID, next year it's going to be exciting. The next 24 months are going to be absolutely exciting in this country. There's an enormous amount of change happening out there. But I walk away thinking, how lucky was I? I got to meet someone who has got a career which is built on a lot of hard work. They didn't get there easily. They probably made lots of sacrifice. I watched their style and how they engaged, how I felt meeting that individual, take it on board. Mate, that's an MBA on the run. This is real life. That's where the privilege comes from. And guess who I've got to engage? I've got to go and engage some of those people with similar sort of backgrounds. So it's, look, it's really exciting. Ultimately, what you're doing, it's all about purpose as well. Everyone talks about, goals, aims, etc. You've got to have a purpose. And the purpose isn't to fill the bank for lots of money. That's nice. We can get some money and have a reasonable life and look after the people that you care about. But the real purpose I get is you're changing organizations, you're helping people, you're changing people's lives, whether it's the client or whether it's the candidate, and nothing replaces that. Now, today when I get into the office, the first thing I'm going to do, we had a candidate who interviewed who said, no, this role's not right for me, based on what you've said. The client who said, no, I don't think that's right. I don't think this individual's right. He's a direct competitor. Just hold it for a second. We do think it's right. Why don't we arrange a very, very quiet chat somewhere? The offer is going to be made this morning at about 10 o'clock. Now, both parties walked into that room. No, we're just taking your word for it. And guess what happens when people meet? Dynamics change, don't they? And that's interesting. Now, that organization will benefit from this individual unbelievably. This individual has already texted me at about 11 o'clock last night and said, game changer, I'm in. So that's exciting.
Oh, that's interesting. So you know, it's, I suppose you're in situations where you're having to challenge pretty established people that have strong views on things, and you're having to challenge people to possibly think differently about the situation. How important is it in your craft to be a kind of student of human nature and people and knowing how to read the play? How nuanced is what you do?
Look, it's important to a couple of things. Firstly, there's a track record. You look at someone's CV. You've made your call, so there's a reason why you're making that approach, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I may not know this individual. I may know this individual. I may know reputation of this individual. Okay, so I've already got something inkling there. But my next big challenge is somehow to get them in to meet with me or via Zoom this day and age, and then suddenly engage with them, and in 1 hour ascertain whether they're appropriate or not. And they've worked 40 years in their career to get to where they are, or 25 years, 30 years to get where they are. And your client is asking you to make a call on this individual. All right. And that client, in some cases, this is maybe my first engagement with them, or our team's first engagement with them. So there's a lot running through your mind. So you've got to double check that. So first thing I think you've got to think about is your strategy when you meet with someone. Because as I said earlier, Anjit, these people are consummates in what they do. They present day in, day out to the ASX. They present day in, day out to their peers. They present day in, day out to their team. So how are you going to open them up? How are you going to get inside them? How are you going to get them to really spill the beans in some regards, okay, and get a view on them in 1 hour? Then draft a report on your thinking, your findings, your thoughts, and where they fit into, and if they do fit into, what you believe the brief. Are they contrary to the brief? Are they a little bit lateral that your client should see them? That's all the stuff you got to do. Now, how do you do that? I don't know. Everyone's got their different approach. I like to be fairly direct and open. And look, I respect people's time. They've made the time and effort to come and see. You've got to respect that. These people are always very, very busy. So anybody's good enough to do that. Firstly, I respect their time. Secondly, I like to get to the heart of the matter. They're busy. So are we. And I can't do that by sort of just doing the niceties for the next 45 minutes. We've got to get into it, Ranjit. And I'm going to challenge them. So welcome to coming into Blenheim. Once you walk into those walls and close that door and you sit down with us, it can be interesting times. And it's going to be, that's what we're getting paid to do. We're getting paid to do, Ranjit. I can't write a report. I can't discern between the top 10 otherwise. And that's what the client is asking us to make an evaluation, an appraisal, a recommendation, and you better back it up. Because maybe they've crossed paths with this individual in that industry. Right? Maybe they've already got a view. And that's what you've got to talk through. And then you've got to go back to the brief, to the client and say, look, I agree, outstanding individual. But based on what you told us, based on where the company is going, based on what the restructure looks like, based on what the potential float may be, is this the individual that you think is going to take you where you want to get to? That's what we've got to focus on. And that sometimes goes contrary. Sometimes it ticks the box. Sometimes, Ranjit, depending on certain organizations, you just want a big name, right? That's going to set the tone for the analysts out there. It's going to set the tone for the market out. And that person's going to bring a wealth of experience. And that person's going to attract other very good people. So there's different strategies for different roles.
How much of that decision making, Greg, is qualitative versus quantitative? Like, ultimately, do you roll with your gut in terms of your recommendation? Like, what if the data, because I know you have analysts, the data is telling you there's a misalignment, but there's just something within you that says this guy or this woman is the right fit. What do you do there?
Well, look, when we have an interview, I very rarely do it myself. Okay, so you say the analysts or the researchers, we call them. I'm really fortunate. I've had a team now who, really privileged. They work their backside off. They're exceptionally motivated. Undertake excellent research on people. Do a lot of backgrounding on people. I'd also do the background. I get your hands dirty. You got to get your hands dirty. That's your job. You're representing a client, and there could be 3 or 4 of us in one of those interviews. That can be a little bit daunting as well in some cases, right? But these are senior people. Hey, we're not talking about someone commencing their career. We're talking about someone who's in full flight in their career. All right. And if you can't walk into a boardroom and hold your own, then that's something to be tested straight away. It'd be surprising. Some people do get nervous because they haven't done an interview for 10, 15 years. They've been tapped on the shoulder all the way through their career because based on their work they've done, they've been outstanding. And now for some reason they've agreed to come and see us, right? We've asked them to come and see us. Then we will sit back straight after that interview, look at the brief, look at the questions to our look at the responses to a number of our questions as we thought through before we sat down with them. All right, so it's not random. You don't walk in and say, "Hi, how you going? Let's just shoot the breeze." You've got a nature of questions that you know about this individual. We're going to be apt, which are going to help us in regard gauging their capability and fulfilling the requirements of the client. And then to answer your point, some of it does come to a bit of instinct, experience, gut. You talk about our podcast. Some of the stuff I've learned from the guests that we've had, particularly at the top level now, he's taking some of these CEOs, the special forces guys we've had, the army guys we've had in, will say to you that you've got to rely on your gut. You've got to rely on your instincts. Sooner or later, you just can't, maybe comms have gone down, you're going through some ravine. If you don't feel something here, you're going to be wiped out in an ambush in about 10, 15 steps. And these guys know that, right? It's not the same, obviously, and we're not anything like that. But you're sitting in front of someone's telling you all the answers, which sound so true. It's perfect. It's perfect. Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Something's not right. I've got to find out more now, and that's when we'll go into full. Then we'll make a number of more calls on an individual, right, to really clarify what they've said. And again, that's the beauty, that's the fun of the job, right? You're meeting really interesting people in the surroundings where they're coming in confidence, okay, and they're opening up and having a conversation with you, and it's done in absolute confidence, and that's the respect that we've all agreed to, and then you got to treat them with courtesy, and then you got to get back to them later, and some aren't going to make it, right, for X, Y, Z and reasons, and that's always the worst part about the role. You got to sit back and say, "I'm sorry." On this particular occasion, we will be going forward with others, and these are the reasons why, which you have to share. They're good enough to give their time again. Experience does come into play. That's what clients are asking you for, right? Not everybody. This is the funny thing. You remember, not everybody can interview very well, right? Everyone says, okay, you meet the headhunters and the good headhunters, or the search guys like ourselves. Do it day in, day out, right? And you get a range of personalities. One big personality is going to roll in and dominate that room. Someone could be very, very quiet. And you think, oh, that's not right. Yes, it is. Look at their background. Right? They don't have to beat their chest to tell them they're the best. They just do it because they just do it, right? How do you build your teams? How do you motivate your people? That's always fascinating. There's so many different ways they go about it. And how do they get outcomes? Are they outcomes driven? Yes, they are. But what's a real outcome in their mind? What does good really look like in their mind? Did they inherit really good work previously and are trading off the back of that and someone else's good work? That's what you got to find out. And they're claiming that, and people do that. Or do they really build it themselves? What do they do? What do they change to get there? So that's when you got to push a little bit, Ranjit. You start challenging them somewhat. So that's interesting you say that, Ranjit. Your predecessor, I believe, laid the foundations. Isn't that true? All right. How do you know that? Well, that's what we're supposed to do. And we understand this and this. And I believe you had a situation a number of years ago where this happened. Is that true? Did you take that accountability? Did you take responsibility? In regards to that M&A deal you talked about, did you actually sit opposite the banker? Or were you behind? What was your role? Please don't overstate what you did, because we're going to find out. That's our job. All right. So that's makes it interesting.
And so in terms of the qualities that you have seen that have made these people successful, I mean, they come from a wide array of backgrounds, obviously different personality profiles. As you said, some may have bigger personalities, some may be a bit more quiet because of the work. But what are some of the consistent themes and qualities you see with these individuals that have driven their success from a behavioral perspective and just from who they are?
Most of them are pretty comfortable in their own skin.
Mm.
Right by this time, they don't. In fact, their egos. We talk about it. Their egos aren't there. Okay, there's a bit of difference between ego and confidence. There's no reason why they shouldn't be confident. They've done the hard yards. They've made the big calls to put themselves out there. A lot of them are fairly humble, right? It's the ones 2 or 3 levels down who are less so humble. All right, trying to get to the top. Good listeners and answer your question. That's a big thing when you ask a question. So many people try to answer the question how they want it to be answered as opposed to listening to what we've actually asked. They recognize that it's not about them, that what it's about is building the appropriate team and getting that, and they understand the value of having really good people around them. And you ask them that, and a simple thing is when you left A, B, and C, went to company X, Y, and Z, how many people followed you? Did they follow you? Has many people in your career followed you? If so, why do you think that's the case? And you start seeing patterns as well, and they recognize that. They're able to make decisions. A lot of people out there are really good managers, not necessarily really good leaders. All right. And there is a difference. You need managers, but you also need leaders, right? And leaders have to make the call. They've got to live with the results. And that's what you're trying to find out. And these people can live with it. And they also recognize you don't always get it right. So they've got that ability to bounce back. They've got that resilience. They don't get it wrong very often, all right, because they've done their homework on that. But, it's sector by sector too, Ranjit. Someone in mining or industrial is going to be different to someone in media, in style and engagement and way they motivate. Do they walk the floor using that old language? How do they inspire others? Do they inspire? Or are they the quiet person who inspires in a different way? Do they do the town halls? Do they write the memos once a week on a Friday during COVID? Do they do video during COVID? What do they do? You've got to find out how they lead, right? Mm-hmm. So they're all comfortable in their own skin. They've got a clear strategy in mind. They're executing that strategy, and they're executing it through people. That's where they're really good at. They recognize that. And I expect success.
In your experience, are all these individuals high IQ? Like, how important do you think IQ is to get to the top of your craft?
Oh, look, no doubt about it. The people I interview most times out of 10 are exceptionally bright, right? They are. Right. But they're not always the brightest in the room, in their own company, what they do. What they're all very good at. And often, I remember years ago when I was in London, a very senior executive came to see me. So I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. I'm working for these people. And this person had built a really good career, but every time seemed to get pipped at the post for the big role. And came and saw him and said, look, I got done again. I said, okay, yeah, sure. What happened? Mary or Bill got the role, and they're not as smart as me. I said, well, okay, so why do they get the role, you think? They got different EQ. They engage differently. It's engaging and influencing. They're the two big things. How do I engage with people? And how do I influence to get the outcome? Now, if I'm super bright and I can work things out, that's great. That's great. But a lot of super bright people can't communicate as well, right? So it's about the engagement. And the really top leaders, you just see they're just natural. They make you feel comfortable. They make you feel special. They make you as if you're the only person in the room. You've seen those individuals. They engage with you. They motivate you. Guess what? You're volunteering to do more work than you thought you're going to do, or go above what you thought beforehand. That's what they can get. That's what they do. So I think, yes, IQ is important, no doubt about it. And these people are normally normally have a very good IQ, but their EQ is pretty red hot. Those who don't have a good EQ, I found out sooner or later by reputation, something goes wrong, something gets picked up, and they'll go. That's as far as they can go. It's like a lot of people who, when you build your career. So everyone listening to this, you're going to build their career. You could be an engineer. I don't know. You could be something else where it requires really good. It could be an accountant. It could be a doctor. Requires really, really good expertise in the day in, day out of the job. That's fine. That's what got you to that point. The next point is, but how am I going to become a really good leader?
Mm.
And that's when you got to say, okay, these skills aren't going to make me a good leader. They're going to make me really good at doing the job day to day. That's the operation side of it. Now, the big step up now is to lead, and that's where I got to move away from these skills and develop those new ones. And those that gravitate to wanting to get into the detail and holding into the operation, they're gone. That's as far as they're going to go. They become operational mindset, if you want to sort of call it, between operational versus strategic. And those that have the strategic mindset, to your point earlier, yeah, they have the IQ. They also have a pedigree in the sense that they're pretty good in their career and what they did in understanding operations. But then they sat back and looked at themselves and said, right, okay, but however, if I'm going to run a company, run a business, create an industry, build an empire, whatever it's going to be, I've got to change. And that's going to be about how I lead and how I engage and how I influence. And that's a set of different skills.
Now, that's brilliant feedback. I think, for individuals that are looking to get to that next level, it's like, okay, how do I move beyond the technical application? And then how do I now understand that I have to mobilize people and influence? And I think that's what you're talking about.
100%.
Before we wrap up, I want to talk about you, Greg, in terms of your daily mechanisms to keep you at the top of your craft. How do you stay hungry, focused, and just on point?
I don't know. I think you just got to have it in you a little bit, don't you, actually?
Mm.
Well, firstly, you got to enjoy what you do, right?
Mm.
So that's the first thing. Funny enough, in doing these podcasts, and I was, when I started this, I did it again because I just level of curiosity.
Mm.
I wanted, when again, as a search person, you were privileged to information. I was reading stuff in the newspapers. So I knew we had a better insight than some of the stuff I was reading in the papers. And I thought, right, hold it. Well, why don't we do a podcast and learn from these really good leaders, and as a result, open the debate somewhat more and push a little bit. So I have a genuine interest in people. I have a genuine interest in how business gets formed or organizations grow. I don't care whether it's a charity who's doing the best, whether it's a hospital who wants to be the best and bring in the new care, or a scientist who's sitting there at 2 a.m. in the morning, in their lab, which could change the world in some form. So I just get energized by just seeing people on the edge, and in our role, we get to meet people who are pushing the boundaries somewhat, I guess, if you want to use that language, who want to excel in what they have chosen as their particular career. So you get out of bed in the morning, pretty easy, Ranjit. I'm up most mornings, crack of dawn. I go to bed pretty late most nights. I don't need a lot of sleep, so I'm pretty lucky in that regard. So I take myself pretty fortunate. I read a lot. I get across the global news. I like international news, so I want to see what's happening in the US, the UK, Europe, in politics, Africa, what's going on in events over there. What's happening in the price of oil, what's going on in inflation, where's the strategies in the economy, et cetera, et cetera. How's that going to impact Australia? I look at politics very closely in Australia. I'm interested in that. End of the day, they're supposed to be representing us. So I'm interested in that. So I like to look at that, and then how does that translate into the impact what's going to happen in our economy, and how is that going to translate into the type of leadership that certain organizations are going to be mindful of now. We're in really, really exciting times. We're coming out of this COVID. You've heard, I think, Ranjit, everyone talks about the great
resignation. Yeah.
Right? Now, is it true or not true? I've spoken to a lot of people in the US, and I think it's game on. People are resigning.
Mm-hmm.
Are they resigning with no job to go to? Some may be. I think that's pretty brave. But there's a feeling that I've been locked down for a period of time, and I want to change something. In Australia, the amount of people who are returning our calls, and that could be as sources when I'm seeking advice on individuals, or I've left a message for someone that I need to speak to, or the team wants to speak to in regards to a particular brief that we're working on, who we feel could be a potential candidate, overwhelming.
Mm.
If you've been locked down for 18 months and 2 years, and in some of the states in this country where you really got to question the leadership and what's been said and done, It's hurt people. It's mentally hurt people. They've been challenged, and they can't. Some of them don't even have the right to walk down to go 5, 10 Ks, 15 Ks at one stage. So one thing they can potentially look at, they could alter their career trajectory. They could change the They could change the people they're going to work with. Now, from our point of view, as a search firm, we're having calls with people who aren't necessarily sitting in the office as they used to be. They're not ducking into that extra room. They're actually sitting there taking that call,
Right.
and willing to explore that somewhat. So one big message out to every chief exec, CFO, COO in Australia at the moment, pretty much guarantee you every member of your team is being tapped. And if they're not being tapped, then they shouldn't be in your role because they're not good enough. That's what's seriously happening out there. The amount of willingness of companies looking at time to make change. In the last 12 months, Ranjit, the turnover in chairman is up 100% in chairs. Sorry, I said that again. Turnover in chair is up 100% year on year. In CFOs, which are the people who ultimately deliver the numbers and hold the company accountable, they're up 50%. And that's enormous. They're fairly conservative in what they do, up 50%. Boardroom, enormous change in the boardroom. So with the impact of digital, with the impact of being shut down and saying we've got to get growth, we've got to seize opportunities, there's an enormous amount happening in the terms of IPO, so floats, companies going to be floated. Mergers and acquisitions are on. Investment bankers are exceptionally busy at the moment. So it's exciting. So, of all the negative news out there, the next 24 months, unless interest rates take off, which the Reserve Bank has sort of said numerous times they'll keep low, it's looking really exciting. And with that, I think people are saying, well, hey, okay, maybe this time I've had a chance to reflect. Actually, there's a real think through on the companies that I work for. What's the purpose of this company? What is it? What is its role? And what's my role in the broader part of society? Am I contributing any more than just taking an income or a wage? Am I adding in any form? And that's been a big feel, what we've noticed. So companies now and organizations have to be really mindful of, it's not just the money. It's not just a great bonus. That's nice, but actually what's the purpose of the organization? And they've got to really communicate that. And that's where it's going to be the next 2 years. Going to be really quite exciting.
It's great insights, Greg. I echo those sentiments. The business landscape has changed. The psychology of employees from mid-level to senior leaders have changed. It's a dispersed environment. People are, they're now ready to get out there and have a crack. And I could imagine how that's shifted the landscape. And I see it within our industry, within our business as well. So thanks for those insights. And I think we'll wrap it up there, Greg. I just really want to thank you for your time. Love the No Limitations podcast. I recommend for anyone out there in executive land to tune in. But yeah, Greg, just super grateful that you made the time such early morning to come and join us here at Ultra Habits.
Mate, you're doing a great job from what I'm hearing. It's not easy to do these podcasts, so keep it up, Ranjit. Great to see. And I'll look at your guests have been terrific. Well done.
Thank you.